Good day from the Asian Institute of Technology. Welcome to DRSD 2021's technical session number 2, Vulnerability, Resilience, and Sustainable Development 1. My name is Luis Arboleda and I am the Zoom host for this session. My fellow here is the rapporteur, Ms. Afshana Parvin. A few reminders before we start. This Zoom session is being recorded. The recording will be made available upon request. If you have any objections, kindly inform us beforehand. There will be a total of 9 presentations in this session. A technical session chair will be announcing each presentation and respective presenter. The discussion and question and answer portion will be held when all 10 presentations have ended. The audience can take advantage of the chat box to ask their questions and queries to the presenters. We would like to request the presenters to keep tabs on the chat box and answer any questions directed to them. If not, we may address these questions at the end of the session. Now, before we proceed to the presentations, it is my privilege to introduce to you the technical session chair. Our first co-chair is Dr. Mokbul Morshed Ahmad. He is an associate professor in development planning management and innovation in the School of Environment, Resources and Development, AIT, Thailand. He holds a PhD in development geography from Durham University. He did his first master's in geography and environment from Dhaka University and his second master's in rural and regional development planning from AIT. Now, without further ado, kindly welcome Dr. Mokbul. Dr. Mokbul.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Luis. So, Luis, can you help me? So, given the delay that has happened, so how much time each presenter would be having?
Because of the delay, we have 15-minute delay. Our question and answer portion may be reduced to 10 minutes only.
Yeah, you should have some good questions. Yeah, okay. So in that case, each presenter will get maximum how much time?
We have a maximum of 8 minutes. The presentations are pre-recorded.
Okay. So if they're pre-recorded, then so you just play them now, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And I think they're all 8 minutes anyway. So, but I think 10 minutes, okay, we will try our best. Maybe I'll try to pick up some questions in the chat box. If anybody wants to go further, please, they can communicate. Isn't it, Luis? They can communicate by any means. So we can try and check anybody can answer. The presenters are there to answer questions. Can you confirm?
Yes.
All are there. Thank you very much. So maybe you please announce who is going to be the first and then start, please.
Okay. But before that, our co-chair just arrived.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, please.
Yes. Okay. So our next co-chair is Professor Dipti Vikramasinghe. She is a professor in environmental sciences in the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. She serves as a steering committee member of South Asia Alliance of Disaster Research Institutes and South Asia Water Partnership. She has published numerous articles on water ecosystem ecology, disaster management, and urban sciences. Welcome, Professor Vikramasinghe.
Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome. Yeah, please.
Okay. So, Dr. Mokbul, shall we start the presentation?
Please.
The first presentation is from Yang Wei.
Hello, dear participants. This is Yang Wei from the University of Tokyo, a PhD student. The title of my presentation today is Evaluating Urban Resilience in Planning, the case of Chengdu, China. The context consists of 5 parts. Importantly, Section 3 introduced the method and materials used in the studies combined with the context of China and case cities. Section 4 summarized the evaluation results of urban resilience based on series of local planning documents. As our societies grow more complex and the environment becomes less certain, it is increasingly difficult to make our socials economic and ecological systems sustainable. Recently, the popularity of resilience have explored in both academic and policy discourse with rapid urbanization and increasing disaster risk, especially in developing countries like China. Urban resilience have become an increasingly favored concept in urban planning and sustainable development policies. But what exactly is meant by the term urban resilience? Furthermore, how to form resilience in urban planning? This study introduced a new method to evaluate local plans in China and tries to understand the resilience thinking in China planning context. These two figures show the relationship between disaster management, resilience, and sustainability, as well as the relationship between the vulnerabilities and the resilience. These figures help us to understand the usefulness of applying the resilience concept to tackle disaster reductions and planning issues. And these definitions of urban resilience, which is adapted from UN Habitat, this definition not only focuses on the urban systems, but also emphasizes the resident in cities. Meanwhile, it shows the relationship between resilience and sustainability. This study used new methodologies to evaluate resilience thinking in planning designed by the CoChairs researchers, which focus on planning documents and consists of these 7 fundamental stages. And the later is the context of the China. As you know, with the introductions of urban resilience into China, the central government have formulated such kind of resilience-related policies and planning document in terms of urban risk management, spatial planning, and urban governance as table 1. However, it can be seen that many policies aim to build resilience from an engineering approach and like a deep understanding of urban resilience. In the local levels, as the table 2, there are 3 predominant forms of statutory planning, namely socio-economic planning, urban and rural planning, and land use planning. Additionally, disaster prevention planning is selected because it is related to urban resilience. By analyzing the various works and literatures, the following 9 most relevant characteristics or attributes of resilience to make our urban systems more resilient were selected. By carefully document analysis, measures related to resilience in local plans are identified in such kind of tables, which is also combined with the main resilience attribute. Social economic planning focus on the development of cities and societies to improve social efficiency and adaptations, while urban and rural planning mainly aims to improve the robustness and the physical connectivities of the urban systems through infrastructure and transportation systems. Land use planning emphasize land controls and the efficiency of the land use. Finally, disaster prevention planning also focus on the efficiencies and adaptations of disaster management and the emergency response. Based on document reviews and quantitative analysis, it is concluded there was a clear sense of resilience thinking in local plants in China, especially in efficiencies, adaptations, robustness, and connectivities. And these attributes are merely reflect in infrastructures, transportation systems, and social development. However, some other urban resilience attributes, especially those related to social capital buildings, such as integrations, inclusions, and innovations, from the urban resilience framework, local plans in Chengdu have different concerns in these four dimensions. The results show that planning for urban resilience in China is still based on the top-to-down and engineering approach, making public participations and social governance between public and the government. At last, there are some simple conclusions of these studies. In a word, although there are some resilience thinking in local plans in China, but most of all of these are from engineering perspectives and like social capitals and community-based approach. Nowadays, as urbanizations and economic growth are slowing down in China, there is a need to consider some new approaches and alternatives for resilient and sustainable cities planning and buildings. Thank you for your attention, and please let me know if you have any comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, the next one, please. Please, type your questions, comments, so we can, deal with them after the presentations. Yeah, Luis, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's topic is Does indigenous tourism contribute to indigenous resilience to disasters? A case study on Taiwan's highlands. My name is Dr. Mujahid Mustafa Bayrak from the Department of Geography of National Taiwan Normal University, and I thank you all for listening to my presentation. But the problem statement of today is it's not clear to what extent indigenous tourism increases the climate resilience of indigenous households and communities. Disaster governance studies increasingly focus on soft measures and social-cultural aspects, whereas tourism studies increasingly focus on resilience. But how does indigenous tourism contribute to indigenous resilience, especially in a post-disaster recovery or reconstruction context? So the theoretical framework is as follows. Indigenous resilience is defined as the ways in which cultural factors such as knowledge and learning, along with the broader political ecology, determine how local and indigenous people understand, deal with, and adapt to climate change. Indigenous tourism is tourism activity in which indigenous people are directly involved, either through control and or by having their culture serve as the essence of the attraction. And we studied this in the context of Typhoon Morakot, which struck Taiwan in 2009, and subsequent disaster recovery efforts. So the question is, within the context of post-disaster reconstruction, what's the influence of indigenous tourism on indigenous resilience? The methods that we used were household surveys, semi-structured interviews, desk research, and a participant observation in 2019. So this is the study context. We did research in 3 villages. The first village is Shanmei village, which you can see here. The Shanmei village is very famous for Danayuko Ecological Park. This is a park in which people can do fish sighting activities. And this is a park which is very much a community-based initiative. The next village is Chashan village, and Chashan village is very famous for its homestays. It's an eco-village, and most of the activities in terms of tourism happen within the village. Sinmei village, the third study site, it's sandwiched between Shanmei village and Chashan village, and actually have very few tourists. They used to have hiking trails that were very famous, but after Typhoon Morakot, those hiking trails got destroyed. So within this context, we did a comparative research between the 3 villages. So all 3 villages had some kind of tourism activities, but most importantly, in Shanmei, around 90% of the households is directly or indirectly involved in tourism. As I said, Danayuku Park is very famous, and they have tourists on a quite big scale. Chajan village, around 30 to 40% of the households involved in tourism. It's very much an eco village, focusing community-based tourism, and they had homestays. Sinmei village, there's some camping and some farming experiences for the tourists, but they don't host homestays, and it's very hard for them to find their own tourism niche. So in terms of the impacts of Typhoon Morakot, well, first of all three villages were indigenous Tsou villages, and Tsou people, they are Taiwan's indigenous people, and they've developed very complex traditional ecological knowledge systems. And all three villages were heavily affected by Typhoon Morakot. For example, in Alishan Township, where all three villages are located, 95 houses were destroyed. Tourism industry suffered around 1 billion Taiwan dollar or 36 million US dollar in losses. And you can imagine that this had a huge impact on the tourism industry, also of the three villages. So households stated that Morakot had some impact on their housing structure, personal belonging, work equipment. They faced agricultural losses and had a loss of income. Also very important to mention is that a lot of local ecosystems got destroyed because of Typhoon Morakot, such as riverbeds and local river ecosystems. In Sinmei, the former village had stated people do not come to Sinmei anymore because a selling point got destroyed. Sinmei was known for its beautiful hiking trails along the river. So if you look at an aerial photo of Chaishan in 2005, here was the old bridge. This was the riverbed before Typhoon Morakot. This was in 2005. 2017, you can see that the riverbed has been widened, a new bridge has been built, but you can also see that there's more development going on within the village. And I would like to know, why is this the case? So some key findings of this research. Well, post-disaster recovery efforts within the three villages was generally implemented in a top-down manner, which is consistent with other studies that have been conducted in the context of Taiwan and Typhoon Morakot. At the household level, we find that participating in tourism played a salient, albeit diverse role in post-disaster recovery among the households of the three villages. Households in Shanmei and Chaishan proclaimed that tourism became more important in the community after Morakot, whereas households in Sinmei stating more or less the opposite. So they said after Morakot, tourism became less important. We found out that development associations within each village played a key role in tourism development, post-disaster recovery, and other socioeconomic affairs. Development associations are kind of a non-governmental organization, but they serve as they have a bridging function between higher level governments and the local community. And after Morakot, government interest surged in tourism communities. And local households in Shanmei and Chaishan had more access through their development associations in acquiring funding. And this funding could be used for post-disaster recovery efforts, but also for tourism development and agricultural development. And in my research, I found out that there were new winners and losers that were created. Why is this the case? Because after Morakot, the Taiwanese government decided to prioritize tourism communities first in post-disaster recovery efforts. A national level government proclaimed the government first helped the famous Danayuku Park and then Chaishan and later Sinmei because tourism had to return as soon as possible. The tourism communities have first priority. So we found inter-community discrepancies. Tourism communities were given priority to recover and more funding was allocated to those tourism communities first, because the idea was that tourism could play a rehabilitating role in making these communities recover from Morakot. But we also found inter-communities discrepancies. Households involved in tourism had a strong relationship with development associations, and therefore they also had more and better funding opportunities. And we also saw that there were information asymmetries on funding between members and non-members among communities. So we found out that development associations played a key role. They had links to higher government agencies, and they also had relationships with community members and the involvement in community-based tourism, DRR and post-disaster recovery. Those are so-called vertical relationships. And we also saw the importance of horizontal relationships. So for example, relationships with other development associations in other villages and relationships with institutions within the community and village. So even though we found a positive relationship between community-based tourism or indigenous tourism and disaster risk management, We also found out that development association played a key or crucial role in this. I end the paper with whether we should have more opportunities for indigenous communities than simply moving to a relocation village or eco-village. And I do think that this is the case. I don't understand why indigenous tourism is always seen as a solution to post-disaster recovery efforts in the context of Taiwan. So this was it all. This was my presentation for today. I thank you all. I invite you to read my full paper, which is associated with this presentation. And here are my contact details. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Luis, there is a request to make the presentation in the full screen. Can you do that?
Hi, Dr. Makbul and dear participants. Kindly, we are already playing from a full screen. The settings will be in the, you can change the view mode. It's either the view mode can be speaker or gallery view or the standard mode. The standard mode will be the participants and all other speakers will be at the top. And then you can, for the speaker or side-by-side view, you can resize accordingly. And yeah, it's up to your liking, but we cannot control how we are using Zoom from other systems. Thank you.
Thanks. So maybe the next presenter, please.
Okay.
Good morning to everyone. So I'd like to present today building resilience against floods in India, human development, income, inequality and forest cover. In this paper, we are basically establishing the causal relationship between these indicators and the resilience capacity of a state. So this should be my structure of the presentation. So as you know that impact or loss and damages from natural disasters have been increasing over the years, and flood is a major disaster. So when you look at the relationship between development as a natural disaster, so there's a two-way relationship. There's a direct relationship, as the indirect, there's a spillover effect. There's appropriate investment on the disaster mitigation options. And second, that suppose you are a developed state, you might invest on quality of institutions, education, access to healthcare, so overall development that will reduce loss and damages. So studies also, the existing empirical studies also found that these three studies, if you look at, they found that the people in the developing countries are less exposed to disaster, less number of people are exposed to disaster in the low developing countries, but the impact is much higher. Similarly, there are fewer deaths reported in the developed nations, but there's a huge fatalities in the developing nations. So it seems that there is a relationship between development as well as the loss and damages from natural disasters. Looking at the existing literature, there's four kinds of literature available, four strands of literature. So initial one strand is telling that there's a negative relationship. Then you'll find there's an inverted usage. Initially, with increasing the development, loss and damage increases, but after threshold it declines. But this relationship depends on whether we are low risk and high risk countries. Low risk, it's inverted usage. High risk is a usage, but Harry Rytel found that there is no significant relationship. So there is a different kinds of contradictory findings and mixed findings. So I have taken the information from India, the state-wise information, the loss and damage to floods, to establish, to see that whether there is any, what kind of relationship basically that exists in India. So in this case, we are looking at the four indicators, that's human development, income, inequality, and forest cover. Let me mention that income, income is widely studied. Forest cover is recently, few studies have focused on forest cover, mostly with respect to cyclone storms, that's basically the mangrove forest cover. But otherwise, the development, human development, inequality is largely ignored. So this is the basically information about the states, which is basically in part is increasing. And if you look at the state-wise information, let me focus on one state as like Karnataka. So economy loss and damage is high, but when you look at that, population affected is low. Bihar, the population affected is high, but economic loss and damage is low. But why? Why these differences? Something beyond that intensity, something like socioeconomic factors might be playing role. So if we look at this, it's basically establishing the relationship between average HDI and average of percentage of people affected. The right hand side figure average HDI, the average economic loss and damages. It seems that with increasing the human development index, the percentage of people affected declines and also economic loss and damages also declines. It seems that human development has some impact, okay, has some role in the case of defining number of people affected and basically deciding number of people affected and economic loss and damages. So we have used the regression techniques, the following the Pereira et al. Method. We have used the Poisson with cluster standard error to look at the relationship between the income, inequality, human development, and forest cover with respect to the loss and damage indicators. So we have considered three indicators as people affected, human casualties, and number of houses damaged. So if I look at this, SDI is found as negative as well as significant in case of human fatalities. You have higher SDI, you have having less number of people likely to be died because of natural disaster, or death is less number of death likely to be reported because of natural disaster. But in case of people affected and houses damaged, it's not significant. Even it's a positive sign, it's not significant. Okay. Similarly, in case of income, we have not found a significant result. It seems that we are basically able to save the lives, not the livelihoods, not the infrastructure. Okay. If you look at the forest cover, it's found as negative, which is expected. Okay. When the forest cover is high, the less number of people is affected. Looking at the Gini coefficient, houses damaged. It's surprising to me that is a negative relationship. Gini coefficient basically measures the inequality. It measures basically inequality from 0 to 1. Suppose I'm moving towards 1, you have high inequality. So 0, you have less inequality. Means you are high inequality. Okay. So then you are less number of houses damaged. Okay. Similarly, the number of NFY and DRR, the special number of flawed years in the previous years, or disaster risk reduction, we have not found anything about the learning effect, and the DRR also working better because we have found that there is a negative relationship with the houses damaged. So what we have found that increasing loss and damages from floods in India and across the states, no significant impact of income on loss and damage indicators. Human development significantly reduces fatalities from floods. Forest cover is also having negative impact on loss and damage indicators. Surprisingly, negative relationship being observed for inequality. Higher human development income do not necessarily mean that states are becoming climate resilient. Lack of evidence about the learning effect, how a disaster is managed to reduce loss and damage. The main policy suggestion is that we should integrate climate change in the development planning. Because the National Action Plan on Climate Change, State Action Plan on Climate Change, State Disaster Management and district level, there should be a integration of all the departments, and the climate change should be part of all the departments. And also there is a lacuna so far is that integration and missing of development issues. If you look at the SDR, Human Development Reports, no discussion on natural disaster except the state like Odisha, even it is a major theme in the international SDR in 2007, although it's known that it's clear that natural disaster might influence the Human Development Index. So thank you for your patience. If you have any comments, query, anything and suggestions, please write back to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was very interesting paper, certainly. Yes. Thank you very much. Let us please, could I remind you to just to hold on your questions? You can put in the chat box, or you can, you can also make it when the floor for that. Luis, next one, please.
Hi, good day, everyone. I'm Shantini Kanasan from Center for Global Sustainable Studies, University of Science Malaysia. And along with me is Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saidi Hassan, and I'll be presenting a research on challenges in addressing green growth in Malaysian cities. The presentation will look into 5 matters. The first is what is urban green growth and why is it important to cities, followed by the challenges faced by cities in achieving green growth, and then the study's significance and methodology used for this particular research. And then I'll be touching about the a city green growth, green economy should look into 6 crucial matters and what are these matters, and followed by a proposed framework for cities to successfully implement urban green growth. So what is urban green growth? Um, urban growth is defined as the rate at which the population of an urban area increases. This results from urbanization, which is important for people from rural areas when they migrate to urban areas. Urban green growth, as such, is a departure from the traditional economic strategy of growth first, clean up later to a more responsible economic growth, with emphasis on environmental and social concerns, a low carbon economic growth, holistic approach designed to integrate 3 pillars of sustainable development: economic development, social development, as well as environmental sustainability. So why is it important to cities? As cities strongly influence the economic and environmental performance of countries, they are crucial drivers of growth. And cities also account for an estimated of 67% of global energy use and 71% of global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions globally. Urban green growth hence fosters economic growth and development through urban activities that reduce negative environmental externalities and the impact on natural resources and environmental services. The study explores various approaches to achieving green growth in Malaysian cities. Specifically, it examines ways to promote greening and competitiveness in a fast-growing economy to improve environmental performance in cities and urban quality of life, and to increase the institutional capacity to achieve green growth. The objectives are aimed towards the selection of an appropriate study strategy through evaluating multiple holistic case studies. The study also evaluates and analyzes the capacity of cities in order to address these challenges in steering towards green economy. The study undertook a cross-sectional study as the attempt is not to observe the changes and the development of a phenomenon or phenomena over a period of time from the time horizon perspective. The primary data were collected from 4 focus group discussions with representatives of the government bodies at the national, state and lower government level, civil societies, field experts, professional bodies, business representatives, as well as consultants from private sectors from lower and as well as middle management levels. Additionally, secondary data was collected from documents and archival records, including reports, journals, and standards that are relevant to the focus of the study. And subsequently, the findings were validated through semi-structured interviews with government officials as well as experts from higher management and policy makers. The content analysis and cognitive mapping methods were used with the aid of Atlas TI for the analysis of focus group discussions and semi-structured interview data. So challenges in achieving green growth. Green growth is not a replacement for sustainable development. Rather, it provides a practical and flexible approach for achieving concrete, measurable progress across economic and environmental pillars while taking full account of the social consequences of greening the growth dynamic of economies. The focus of green growth strategies is ensuring that natural assets can deliver their full economic potential on a sustainable basis. That potential includes the provision of critical life support services, such as clean water and the resilient biodiversity needed to support food production and human health. Natural assets are not infinitely substitutable, and green growth policies take account of that. Hence, among the challenges found in this research that hinder successful adoption of green growth practices in cities are green economic possibilities, availability of reliable data, mainstreaming capacity building via cross-departmental collaboration, engaging the people, as well as opportunity for public financing. This research is a city-level case study providing urban leaders with new insights on how environmental policies can contribute to different types of growth. As an example, job creation, the right urban sustainability policies can include retrofitting the existing building stock for improved energy efficiency, as well as attracting firms and workers in efficient transport system, in particular to good public transport networks, as well as to help cities to lure investors. So a city green economy should look into waste industry, renewable energy, green procurement, green urban tourism, green economy for industry, as well as a transit-oriented transportation. So this research outcome was actually to introduce a conceptual framework of urban green growth for cities. As such, among the six sectors that is crucial for successful implementation of green growth was defined in this particular framework. So it is important to have underlying values and policy influence to address the challenges faced by cities, as shared just now: green economy, data availability, capacity building, engaging the people, public funding, and climate change. And then these challenges are addressed by addressing opportunities where there is in land use planning, mobility, green services, as well as solid waste management, which is very, very important to address a circular economy. The enablers to ensure these challenges, as well as opportunities to be implemented, would be a multi-level government policy integration, stakeholders engagement, open data, as well as creative funding. And all these will contribute to a sustainable green economy. Inclusiveness, where this particular framework is a bottom-up approach, it enables climate resilience in cities, as well as it ensures a greener urban environment. So it is therefore suggested to ensure a successful implementation of a green growth framework for cities, these challenges to be addressed, these opportunities to be adhered to, and these enablers can be explored to achieve cities' positive green growth. With that, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nice presentation, particularly with a very good picture of the whole urban challenge to me. Yeah. So, Luis, I mean, with the next presenter, I mean, we can do it now, or we can try for at the end.
We can play the next. We can skip one.
Yes,
yes. The one presenter first. Thank you.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sai from Trinity University. Today I'm going to present my research, the implication for the large-scale post-disaster reconstruction in the indigenous context, the case study in Taiwan. So the research background is, due to the ever-increased disaster, especially natural disaster, the post-disaster reconstruction, the PDR framework, has evolved over time, which need to consider not only the physical but also the socio-economic elements. Especially from the early 1980s onwards, the participatory PDR framework has been advocated, identified as cross-cutting issues. The participatory PDR framework has actually several effects, which seem better than the conventional approach. The first one is a decentralized decision-making, also maximizing the variety of solutions. Here is the introduction of the Typhoon Marac. It hit Taiwan in 2009, August, and caused about 500,000 people get affected. Although it's only 2% of the population are indigenous in Taiwan, however, 73% of the affected households are the indigenous populations. Why indigenous? The definition of the indigenous from the United Nations is that they grew up in on globalized cultures and practicing a culture-specific behavior with their own cognitive style. And also there's a bunch of research there pointed out the vulnerabilities and the weakness of the indigenous groups in the context of the natural disaster. So here is a three-step framework of PDR. The first is the delineation of dangerous areas and site selection. And the second one is design and planning. And the third one is livelihood restoration. And for the case selections, I select the two biggest reconstruction settlement in terms of the number of the household in the southern part of Taiwan. The first one is the Linali, and the second one is the Changzhi Baihe. As for Linali, it accommodates three different tribal communities, which is Dase, Majia, and Haocha. And for the Changzhi Baihe, it accommodates the 7 different tribal communities. Moreover, I'm using the semi-structures interview and also a questionnaire to conduct my research. And so for the first step, as we know, the central government, they prioritize the relocation strategies, and which prompt a confrontation between the indigenous population and the central government. And the government prioritizes the state-owned land as the construction land. However, this kind of decision makes all the permanent housing settlement candidates remote from the original communities. Although the government had held some kind of meeting and briefing in the local communities, but the government, they urged the residents to agree on the contract and reassure that the regulation and the contract are negotiable in the futures. And also, there are very distinct characteristics of different tribal communities. For example, in the Haocha, most of the residents they have the past experience of relocation, and also the community organization is well functioned, and 100% of the settlement has been affected by the Typhoon Maraque. On the other hand, for example, the Dase, Majia, and the other Changzhi Baihe relocation tribal communities, they have no experience of relocation, and they just be partially affected. And also some community leaders, they even reach the decision making of the housing beneficiaries. For the second step, the World Vision, which take the responsibility of the reconstruction of the Linali, they also established a design committee with the local people, so that the local people can be involved in the decision making of the design and the planning. The World Vision construct the biggest type of the permanent housing, regardless of the number of the family members. That is because they knew that before the disaster, actually most of the residents are living in the bigger house. And also the World Vision, they hire more than 100 residents to participate in the construction process. For the Ciji, who take part in the reconstruction project of the Changzhi Baihe, there's no establishment of the design committee, so the local people are excluded from the design decision making, and also they strictly follow the government regulation and even amended the distribution of the housing type provided by the government. Also, there's no construction participation. So this is a big confrontation between the local resident and the NGO. Therefore, the second phase of the construction was handed over to another NGO. So for the livelihood restoration in the Linali, among the 3 communities, all they have a different kind of livelihood restoration strategies. However, the Haocha community account for the most of the profit. The reason is that, as we just discussed, there are 100% destroyed settlement. Therefore, they have to desperately develop and restore their livelihood strategies. For example, the tourism industry. And this kind of the success of the tourism industry also brought the dispute between the younger generation and older generation within the whole communities. And on the other hand, in the Changzhi Baihe, the situation is far from ideal. For example, even though the resident they acquire the arable land from the private company, and they also get exemption of the land rent by the assistance of the government, but after the government they withdrew from the projects, we saw that the resident they find it's very challenging to outline the sales strategy because of their lack of human capital. So after the decades, most of the arable land has been revoked by the company. So here is a discussion of what is the most decisive factor that affect the participatory PDR framework. For the government, the policy is most important. For example, we see the urgency of policy implementation and weak legislation, as well as the contradictory non-indigenous center policy, all affected the effectiveness of the participatory PDR framework. And for the NGO, the flexibility has been deemed most crucial. For example, the NGO had to have the flexibility to conduct the design process to the construction process and involve the local residents. And also they need to facilitate the communication among most of the essential stakeholders, for example, the government, local people, and NGO. For the communities, we see that the damage extent, for example, 100% is damage and the partially damage of the settlement, they reach the consensus differently. And also the community organization are very important. And overall, for the three stakeholders, government, NGO, and the communities, the mutual trust and also the understanding to the participatory concept are all very important. For example, the government, they need to transfer from the informed to empowered, and the NGO, they also need to prevent the strong organizational ideology. For the community, they also need to improve their human capital to outline better livelihood restoration strategies. So this study, I think the result will be beneficial for the practitioners and the government authorities who aim to conduct and improve their PDR outcome. And thank you very much. This is all about my presentation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Luis, maybe the next presenter, please, so we can be on time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vibhas Sukhwani. I'm currently pursuing my PhD research at Keio University, Japan. My research supervisor is Professor Rajiv Shaw. The title for my presentation today is Assessment of Rural Water Security and System Sustainability in Nagpur Metropolitan Area, India. Nagpur, basically, if you look at this map, it's located roughly at the geographical center of India, and it is a major commercial and political center of India also. So recently, the city has been witnessing tremendous growth potentials. And if you see this dark green portion, this highlights the location of Nagpur city, wherein the city primarily receives its water demands from the Pench Dam in the upstream area, which is primarily a multi-purpose project that also serves for the demands of irrigation in the rural areas that are located in this wider Nagpur metropolitan area boundary, and also for industrial purposes. Over the recent years, what has been witnessed is that with the rapid urbanization and industrialization trends, like more water has been allocated for urban purposes. And this, in a way, has led to disproportionate impacts for rural areas in terms of less water for irrigation, and that, in a way, also impacts rural livelihoods. With that background, this research through primary surveys, it specifically focuses on two different types of analysis, that is assessing the change in rural water security and the system sustainability issues. Rural water security, specifically because water security, it provides a broader dimension that covers water related issues, not just from the perspective of water availability, but it also looks onto the aspects of water accessibility, water quality, and water related risks. So over these years, like while the term water security is still evolving, a number of studies have tried executed various methodologies for assessment of water security at different governance scales, like at the global level, national level, regional level, city. Through an assessment of these varying approaches, it has been found that most of these approaches are qualitative in nature and specifically based on indicator-based approaches. So through a comprehensive review of the existing literature and keeping in mind the context of Nagpur, a contextualized water security assessment framework is first developed that broadly relates to the four components, water security, that is the availability, water accessibility, quality, and risk. And a Likert scale is primarily used for the assessment because of two reasons. Firstly, because of the lack of data at the village level. Secondly, because the water resources are shared. The same resources serve for not just for one particular village, but for a wider urban and rural areas at the watershed scale. For the assessment of water security, like 72 villages from across the wider metropolitan area were identified, and these red boundaries, they basically highlight the talukas. So the Nagpur metropolitan areas has roughly 9 broader talukas, and it includes more than 720 villages. So for this assessment, 10% of the settlements, that is 72 villages, were identified, and most of these villages had a population of less than 1,000. For the assessment, focus group discussions were conducted along all the 8 clusters identified. 8 focus group discussions were conducted specifically with the elderly population. And the key purpose here is to understand their perception, how over these years, there has been a change in the different indicators of water security. It has been found that while there has been positive change over the indicators of accessibility, there are certain indicators of water availability, quality, as well as risk, where negative change has been observed. While at the village level, it is very difficult to access the data to cross-validate this information. Therefore, taluka level information was collected specifically for the groundwater resource availability and the allocation, and effort was made how it has changed over the years. So as I highlighted in this particular map, it has been found that the groundwater resources level has been declining. At the same time, the usage of groundwater, that is the draft, has been increasing. So this in a way substantiates the reason behind the declining water availability, the increasing drought related risks, as well as the problems of continuity. Likewise, several other data was also collected to substantiate the other findings from the water security assessment. For the second step, system sustainability issues, this basically represents the challenges that conform to the water management in the rural areas in terms of institutional arrangements, operation and management of water supply at the rural areas, and the financial level issues. And for this, semi-formal interviews were conducted along all the 72 villages, and specifically with the members of village water committees, village heads, and the water person. Herein, it was found that while water committees are existing in all the villages, but most of these committees are not functional, and a need-based governance approach is currently being followed. Likewise, at the technical level, it was found that very few villages maintain any record of water supply and demand, and there's lack of village level water security planning. At the financial level, it was observed that the villages and the village councils are already facing high financial pressures. So herein, it's been noted that while there have been increasing concerns in terms of water security in rural areas, and that are in a way attributed to the rapid urbanization trends and increased water allocation for the cities, at the same time, the capacities of rural areas are limited. And that is apparent through these institutional, technical, and financial challenges. To address these issues, because water is primarily a governance subject, like a review was conducted of the existing policy frameworks, wherein it was noted that there could be several entry points through which an effort could be made to address these challenges. Like, for example, in the aims of water conservation, like the existing Maharashtra state water policy defines sections for an establishment of water resources conservation fund, wherein different stakeholders could contribute, like including the cities, because as we see that one of the primary reasons of these growing water security concerns are also attributed to the rapid urbanization. Likewise, there are certain entry points from disaster risk reduction, public participation, public-private partnership perspective, which I'm trying to pursue further as a way forward, how these challenges and concerns that have been identified through research could be addressed. And towards the end, like as I just highlighted, this research is a part of my broader PhD research, and a number of journal papers and reports have already been published that provide a background to this research. And the importance is reflected, like recently, the importance of one of the articles that I published was also featured in the local newspapers, specifically on the occasion of World Water Day. So with that, I would conclude my today's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Luis, next one, please. Maybe you can, yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Dwi Bayu. In this opportunity, I want to presentation my research about the community-based disaster risk reduction modeling of the Anak Krakatau volcano, South Lampung, Indonesia. On the first author, TB Prasetya and Prof. Rijanta and Dr. Hisbaran, and third is Muhammad Kamal. I come from Institut Teknologi Sumatera and Faculty of Geography, University Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. My introduction is one of the volcanoes in Indonesia that is still active and has a potential disaster is Mount Anak Krakatau. On August 26 and 27 in 1883, the island volcano Krakatau erupts, Red Sea wave crashed to height of 118 feet, crashing on the coast of Java and Sumatra and killed more than 13.6 million people. From 1927 to 1929, eruption in the center of Krakatau complex have produced a new volcano named Anak Krakatau, which continually built its body through eruption until now. On December 22, 2018, there was an eruption which caused large waves and tsunami, which generated a tsunami which ran up to 13 meters on the adjacent coast of Sumatra and Java. Death of local disaster agency of South Lampung reflect 100 people death toll and 8 people missing and 1 million people injured and caused 690 damaged houses. Community-based approach have gained importance since long by building a risk-free and resilient community, thereby reducing local level vulnerabilities and enhancing capacities. By integrating GIS and social media information sources from Twitter, as well as community involvement in tsunami-prone areas, community vulnerability information can be done with a special approach, with the hope of benefiting in disaster risk reduction. This research tries to examine community-based disaster risk reduction focused on the Twitter topic classification related to tsunami Anak Krakatau Mound disaster, tweets content in order to support preparedness, response, impacted, and recovery process based on social media. I'm an objective to examine community-based disaster risk reduction from the first perspective, such as physical aspect, social aspect, and economic and ecological aspects. To investigate how emergency response, community, and organization use social media during emergency by tsunami of Anak Krakatau volcano, preparedness, and response. Number 2, to examine the categorization of existing findings with the classification model using naive Bayes. Methodology. This research focus on the Twitter topic classification related to tsunami Anak Krakatau Mound disaster tweets content in order to support preparedness, response, impact, and recovery process based on social media, and data collecting or data collection to select the information that relate were crowd with several bahasa Indonesia with hashtag tsunami Gunung Anak Krakatau, eruption Gunung Anak Krakatau, and Lampung Selatan. Bahasa Indonesia was selected to represent the most used language by Twitter users in multicultural country. The crawling started the day after the tsunami caused by the eruption of Mount Anak Krakatau on December 22, 2018. The tweets were crawled using the Twin module with the Python programming language. After the script for tweet crawling was executed, the tweets were stored in CSV format for further analysis naive Bayes using RapidMiner. And then data processing analysis were processed with pre-processing stage to eliminate unrelated tweets and correct the letter case and punctuation. Based on the date of the post, the tweets were grouped into emergency or reconstruction rehabilitation phase and mitigation. The emergency phase starts right after the meteorological, climatological, and geophysical against PMKG used an early warning. The word that, I'm sorry, the word that appear most frequently in the age group of tweet, individuals or organizations are identified and compared to show the response to tsunami Mon anak Krakatau. Response dynamic are defined by analyzing tweets in 3 phases of a disaster. Expect result, the data processing generate information about the most frequently mentioned word, the tsunami of eruption anak Krakatau mountain disaster reduction. This word reflects resonance or similarity of talk among the community, and there are some sums to close represent the actual condition of the affected community. Data from Twitter consists of valid content result if social media data consistently show a similar information with other official source. This is a discussion. This figures graph of number of tweets, response, community, and organization. From media massa or from newspaper is number of tweet 35, and government institution, and also from the public tweet with the number of tweet is 69. And then figure 2, the display of the data that has been input. There are 123 data samples, then back to the design to continue the process. And figure 3, the result of the process show that the remaining data samples are reduced by 1 to 122 samples. Then return to design to continue sentiment analysis. And then the figure 4, sentiment analysis result, which will then be analyzed using the naive Bayes algorithm. Figure 5, the result of the process of the naive Bayes algorithm, and we can see. And then the figure 6, the level of accuracy obtained is 100%. Conclusion, by helping analyze 100 of tweets automatically, your proposed approach has the potential to impact the way in which response organizations operate, particularly by identifying more accurate and timely information. And I turn in providing better support to those who need them, and even saving more lives from tsunami eruption and Krakatau mountain. This research has several limitations to be considered in preparing the next related research. And the data used in this research is depend on Twitter user. Every single tweet produced by user is what the to be processed and analyzed in the research. This research took only few part of our community tweets into the analysis process, and community tweets produce low representativeness of the general population, but it saw consistently with other media sources like Facebook or Instagram. In the last acknowledgement, this research was one of the beneficiaries of the grant provided by Universitas Gadjah Mada under the 2021 Final Assessment Recognition RTS scheme. Outdoor would like to thank University Gadjah Mada for supporting this research. I think that's all, and thank for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Luis, we could manage the presentation that we missed. Can we try for that?
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. The presentation from Mr. or Miss Pham Xuan Phu. Dear participant with DRSD 21_25, abstract ID. Okay, we can still proceed. We still have two more presentations to go.
Yeah, please carry on. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, yes?
I'm Associate Professor Iftikhar Ahmed from the School of Architecture and Built Environment, University of Newcastle, Australia. I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors and colleagues, Dr. Helen Jiggins and Associate Professor Tayaparan Gajendran. So this project, this paper is based on a project that we undertook on action research in Fiji, and it focused on training of trainer for women leaders or TOT. And it focused on strengthening women's capacity in disaster reduction management, led by the University of Newcastle team with support from CIFAL Newcastle, which is the United Nations Center under UNITAR. And also it was taken in partnership with local stakeholders, supported by the Australian National Commission for UNESCO under DFAT. So looking at the context of the Pacific Island countries, they are as well known by everyone that they are highly vulnerable to all kinds of coastal hazards, particularly because of climate change. And hazards such as storms and cyclones, they have massive impacts in the Pacific Island country. This photo shows the impact of cyclone in 2016 in Fiji, and you can see from the diagram that storms in countries like Fiji and in many other Pacific countries have the greatest impact. So looking at the Fiji context, zooming in on that, and this kind of disasters, coastal disasters and all kinds of climate change related disasters have massive impacts and it actually stifles socioeconomic development and pushes people into poverty with a huge amount of money that is lost in these impacts. As you can see in this diagram at the bottom, that cyclones have taken a massive toll in terms of affecting huge numbers of people over the years. But this photograph is quite interesting. I wanted to point out that the central part of some of the larger islands in Fiji, like Vitulevu here, is mountainous and arid and dry. And because of that, they have massive drought. That is a hazard that is not widely covered. A lot of the discussion on the Pacific focus on hazards such as cyclones. So the motivation for this project is the high vulnerability to hazards in Fiji, particularly for women and children but women at the same time are embedded with the communities and they have strong potential to be leaders for disaster resilience. And so, which is why we focus on women. And the project aims essentially dealt with three main things: empowering learners through a training of trainers, a TOT process, and then through that process, developing community women leadership. And then finally, through these two processes, address and enhance overall community resilience. So the project objectives relating to the aims is firstly to find out what the local capacity building needs are, and then based on that to develop a TOT training package, and then provide training to potential future trainers who will then be supported to run a training for women in a rural location. So the cultural context here is that the training has to be culturally appropriate for women, and it's also appropriate for their social roles, the roles that they have in their families and their communities, and it should actually be complementary, not challenging the existing social structures, but actually supported in a positive way. And also has to be sensitive to local culture, and local trainers were found to be more effective instead of bringing in trainers from outside. And some of the key skills, and I won't go into this great details for some of these leaders, is that they should be able to identify hazards, they should be able to identify the vulnerabilities, and they should be able to develop actions that address these vulnerabilities. And importantly, they should be able to access resources from external organizations and agencies. So some of the key considerations, the TOT was that it has to be, again, specific contextualized for the culture and community and based on the local hazards. And it also has to be adaptive in being improvised depending on the case and the situation, the context. And because of that need for adaptability, these trainers also have to be very agile in the work that they do. So the TOT that we ran in Fiji ran in 2 stages. Firstly, based on extensive consultations with different stakeholders, we ran a training of the main trainers from different organizations and bodies, including ministries, and together with them, we developed or co-designed a training package, and then this train to be run in a rural location. And the main proponents that came out of the training was from the Fijian police force. And you can see in this bottom photograph, these police women, they were the main trainers who later on went on to run the training in the second stage, which was the training of trainers in a village location in a village called Nambutini outside the city of Nandi. This was a 3-day training program. And this was supported by our team from EON. And the training was participatory, interactive, and importantly, there was an evaluation of the training, and overall, there was a very high level of satisfaction expressed by the participants, and they requested for such future training, and also that these training can be upscaled in different locations in Fiji. Some photographs from the training. As you can see, some of these were very hands-on exercises and breakout groups, and people were like learning things by doing, taking walks in their communities, what is called a transect walk, and identifying the local hazards and developing remedial actions. They were all given certificates, which were badged by the United Nations to encourage them in their work. And it's not only the training, but also building up rapport with the participants through social activities, such as sharing meals. And here's a photograph of the cover of the training handbook that we developed, which was shared with all the participants, which consisted of 3 main modules, which was done over 3 days. And then the evaluation that I mentioned followed the Kirkpatrick's 4-level training evaluation model and reaction, learning, behavior, and results, which allowed us to assess what the participants learn and what they're able to contribute in the future. And so coming to the conclusion is that what is more important is that there needs to be a flexibility and adaptability in this kind of training, and less reliance on technology, because in rural locations that might not be reliable. And importantly, and very important, as I keep on talking about it throughout this presentation, is the need for cultural awareness, and also the necessity of synthesizing local knowledge with global technical know-how. And finally, the conclusion also pointed to issues like that stakeholder consultations, engagement of local communities is essential, and not to envisage such a project as an end in itself. It needs to be continued through locally led application, assessment, improvement, innovation, all that. And at the end of the day, the ownership has to be with the local communities, in this case, the Fijian communities, particularly women, the women community leaders. So with that, I will end my presentation, and I thank you from myself and my colleagues, and Vinaka Vakalevu, as said in Fijian local language.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So may I also just remind all the presenters that they have, in the chat box, there are questions for them. Please just get ready for the answers or comments you need to make or like to make. Please, yeah.
Dr. Haman, excuse me, some have raised the questions and they got the answers as well on the chat box.
But I think still they may might like to answer more questions, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
thank you. Luis, please.
Hello everyone. Today I would like to present about vulnerability assessment of Balikpapan, Indonesia for climate change induced urban flooding. This research has 3 authors, me, Aryaningsi, Viva Sukwani, and Professor Rajib Sao. For the introduction, we see at this time global conditions have shown a trend of change in the Earth's surface temperature, which tend to increase every year. Climate change is also increasingly affecting the rainfall pattern, and it's driving urban flood disaster. in fast-growing cities around the world, including Balikpapan city in Indonesia. Even though the vulnerability as main concept of disaster has been examined since long ago, further development is needed, particularly to inform the assessment process to make connection between vulnerability, adaptation, and resilience. The linkage of climate change to increased flooding in Balikpapan has not been discussed widely. However, it may have consequence for any mitigation and adaptation strategy to be implemented. So, because of the background, the research objectives are first to analyze the inter and intra-relationship between climate change and flood risks in Balikpapan city. The second, to provide an overall assessment of vulnerability of flood in Balikpapan. This research used the DPSIR. So the study used a qualitative descriptive approach, and the DPSIR was used to find out the problem and the causal relationship of climate change-induced urban flooding in Balikpapan. The data used were secondary data from Balikpapan City Planning Agency, Environmental Services Agency, Public Works, Field Survey, and Internet source. So the data are the secondary data and primary data. The DPSIR framework is giving a structure within which to present the indicator needed to enable feedback to policymakers and environmental quality and the resulting impact and the political choice made or to be made in the future. So this case study in the Balikpapan city is located in East Borneo province. And then we move on to result and discussion. The driver, pressure, state, impact, and response are identified. Driver represent major social and economic development in society and the resultant change in the way of people live with enhanced production and consumption. So in this paper, the driver is population growth, land use change, climate change, and urbanization. Pressure referred to as the direct and indirect form of stresses caused by driving force, which are anthropogenic in nature. The pressure in this paper or research is carbon emission, temperature, and precipitation. Also state identified as flood itself because the state described by situation or propensities of a resource and its subsequent effect on a related entity which is not considered to be normal or healthy, induced by aforementioned driving force or pressure. And then the impact, we identified three groups of impact: social impact, environmental impact, and physical impact. Impact defined as the form of vulnerability forced by human as well as the natural environment due to in this state. And then last is response. Response described as adaptive capacity in vulnerability concept. So the response identified in Balikpapan are provision of green open space, zero delta Q policy, and provision of independent detention pool. So response is defined by the action taken in order to bring modification into the driving force, lessen the impact, and then to alleviate the impact. This is a driver, population growth, land use change, climate change, and urbanization. As you can see in the figure and the table that built-up area and population density in Balikpapan is very high. And then pressure, we identified carbon emission, temperature, and precipitation. Also, you can see also in the table, Balikpapan Indonesia weather is fluctuative. Then state flood itself. In the year 2016, the area of inundation increased in Balikpapan. So the Balikpapan has experienced in floods every year. You can see in the vulnerability map, there are several points of flood in Balikpapan city. And then the impact related to loss and damage. And then we group into three: social impact, environmental impact, and physical impact. And then the responses that government have been done. First, open green space, zero delta Q, and then the last, independent detention pool. Zero delta Q related to Indonesian government regulation number 13, 20 and 17 concerning spatial planning national territory, or we call RTRW. So the zero delta Q is suggested to be one of the benchmark successful implementation of the regional drainage system plan in the study drainage. We can see the existing response is mostly direct at the state and impact of the system that cause the system in the short term, but it is not concerned from the long term responses. And then the conclusion, first, the PSIR is used to analyze change in flood state and serve as a reasonable framework for compiling the information. The main driver in this research of growth, land use change, urbanization, and energy demand. The driver led to increased rainfall and temperature, leading to higher flood discharge. Damage and sedimentation were identified as the most important impact flooding in the study area. Most responses were devoted to construction to flood control and prevention infrastructure. The existing response in the study area are found to be provision of green open space, zero delta Q, and provision of independent detention pool. The existing response to flood in Balikpapan do not concern on climate change and have led to inadequate problem-solving result. It is not effective to reduce the sensitivity of system to flood in the long term. Response should reduce the magnitude of flood dealing with the driving force and reduce the vulnerability of the system to flood so it can make a basis for decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, Luis, next one, please. Luis?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, please.
Sorry,
Yes.
my internet got lost for a minute.
Oh, sure.
Those are all the presentations. We
Okay,
may now
good.
Discussion.
So how much time we have, Luis?
We have around 7 minutes left.
Only 7 minutes left. So maybe if Dr. Professor Dipti does not mind, so may I first, open the floor?
That's fine.
Please. Thank you very much. May I request anybody who wants to go beyond the questions that we have put in the chat room, then I will invite the presenters to give the reflection. May I request all the presenters to collect the questions and try to highlight maybe quick responses to save time. So may I request anybody who wants to make a very quick question or comment so that they can unmute themselves, introduce themselves also, and then just raise their questions. Please. And I must say that there are many very interesting papers, and I'm delighted to see many people whom I know, whom I met before. So thanks to the pandemic, we are meeting very differently this time. Yes, please. Anybody wants to immediately raise any questions, comments?
Dr. Mokbul, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Professor Dipti.
Yes, I think since no one is asking anything, I'll just volunteer just to make a quick comment, maybe a question too. I think it was a great session and it showed the good spread of issues. And I'm just thinking, and this is common to everyone, just to open up the discussion to see what is the binding thread. Are we all talking about an enhanced view of resilience through our efforts at the grassroots to top institutional efforts? And what is the binding factor within all the different presentations that we had? I think that's something we can talk about. And even as chairs, perhaps you could reflect on it for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So maybe I will open the floor for the presenters. Thanks, Professor Dipti. So any presenters want to carry on this discussion, the binding forces that he Mifti very lightly pointed out in terms of the scale, of course. Yes, please. Anybody wants to start? Presenters from the panel, please.
I have a very quick question for the first presenter, that is Mr. Yang Wei, who presented on the resilience urban planning in the Chengdu city. Because I have visited Chengdu city, I thought of raising this question. So, Mr. Yang, you mentioned about the local planning. I just wanted to know whether the local stakeholders at the grassroots level community, have they been participating in this land use, the urban planning process? Is he still there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Thank you for your
got the question?
Yeah. It's a very wonderful question.
Please. Thank you.
Yes. As for the community participation, it's very few right for local people to join the planning. The planning making, the policy making in the local planning making. So I think it's very critical for local people to have the right or have the process to join the planning making in local China. So it's my.
Thank you, Yang Wei. It's very interesting to know that.
Thank you. Maybe one just very quick from me, Chandrasekhar. I'm a bit surprised that that you would finding on the inequality and the disaster issue. Can you highlight what? That's interesting finding, isn't it? Can you help us on that, Chandrasekhar?
Yeah, that's the interesting finding. So my surprise is that suppose there is a high inequality.
Yes.
The guys, maybe the people, as I know that people are living in the disaster, those people are richer. They're mostly living in the disaster-prone region. And that's why those guys are richer. They might be taking some kind of disaster risk reduction measures to reduce the impact.
Okay.
That's a better, that's based on the secondary data, that's a surprising to me. It needs a primary study to understand.
Yes. We lost him, right?
Right, sir, because my, yeah, I'm there.
Thank you. Please.
I'm audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So from the secondary data, so what the findings I got is surprising to me. So more research is required based on the primary data.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And nice to see you also.
Yeah, nice to see you also. Please. Thank you. Yes. Luis, we have anything which I missed or maybe Professor Dipti missed? You want to highlight anybody has written anything, any comments? So we can immediately, very briefly address that.
Dr. Mokbul, I think all the questions in the chat box are addressed by the presenters.
Okay, maybe. Yes, thank you. Yes. Yeah, maybe Dr. Dipti can continue what exactly, we can, just very few minutes we can discuss that. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Ahmed and the participants. Actually, we are being honored to be in this platform today because it's a very timely topic, the disaster risk reduction and resilience, and we were able to hear lots of new ideas, the novel thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, and a lot of experience from the region and elsewhere. So that has been a very productive session, if I may say this. Thank you very much for the Asian Institute of Technology and Professor Indrajit Pal for organizing this, and the session co-chair, Professor Ahmed, Rui, and all the participants and the technical advisors as well. We have to move from here forward for a resilient and more productive future in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we'll cross our fingers and wait. And we'll hope very soon we could meet physically somewhere to discuss these things further. Thank you very much and good luck. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you very much. Now, Luis, we are on time.
Yes, we are on time.
Thank you. Yeah, you have anything to announce?
Thank you, Luis.
Now, thank you. Yes, please.
Dr. Mokbul,
thank you.
Any words that you want to share?
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. I think it's better. Better you. If you want to have any housekeeping, please let us participants know. Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Mokbul and Dr. Dipti, and all the presenters. Those are all wonderful presentations. It has been an informative session and a fruitful discussion indeed. This session hall will now have a short break before proceeding to the next technical session. Meanwhile, the keynote session 2 will commence in just a few minutes. So you may proceed to the plenary hall again. The link is in the Padlet. Okay, so participants who are keen in continuing the discussions, because I think we had a short discussion time, we encourage all to take advantage of the networking lounge Padlet. Again, thank you very much and see you again. See you in the plenary hall.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.